Well, Dr. Velasco, do you want to just kick things off with just a quick introduction of why we're here, and then I can just jump into things. Craig will join when he joins.
Sure, that's no problem. We can do that, Andrew. So, good morning, everybody. I'm looking at the attendee list, and I think I know everyone here for the most part. I'm Nick Belasco. I'm the medical director of the Bon Secours Concussion Management Program, now part of Westchester Medical Center Health Network Physician Alliance. I think that's the name now. And as many of you know, obviously, I see plenty of your athletes. I'm the school doctor for Middletown, for Goshen, for Cornwall, for Orange County, Ulster County BOCES. And we certainly take care of a lot of head injuries, general sports injury. And I first had an opportunity to start working with athlete intelligence when they were called I1 Biometrics many years ago. Craig and I Middletown started working with them. Craig first, actually, owing to his sort of forward-thinking, inspirational, athletic, medicine nature, was talking to them about head impact monitoring devices to try to get a better sense of what are the forces involved when contact athletes are injured, or just even during regular play, and can we do a better job monitoring that and having a better understanding of what happens to our athletes when they have contact. And so that was an interesting relationship that really moved forward aggressively when the CDC actually decided to run their flagship study on contact in football and youth athletics using the sensors from athlete intelligence. And Craig was involved in certain aspects of that study, and I was the safety director for it. And it was run in Orange County with many of the kids who are probably now your athletes who came up through Orange County Youth Football League and flag football as well. We collected a lot of really fascinating and interesting data about how different tackling styles specifically affect the rate of concussions and the types of forces that are involved. And it was really very eye-opening, and it was a nice validation of the concept of head injury monitoring through linear and rotational acceleration monitoring, as sort of an intelligent way to start looking at what's happening to athletes on a case-by-case basis during play. And that's published. You can go to the CDC website if you're interested in learning more about how the mouthguard sensors from at that time, again, I1 Biometrics, I think they may be listed as I1 Biometrics in that study. So in case you're confused, but it may just say athlete intelligence, I'm not sure. Sort of following that, obviously, the coronavirus pandemic got started and really disrupted sports for a lot of us. Sort of everyone's kind of getting back together in the sports medicine community nationally to start sort of restarting things, start talking about safety issues again, things that we largely put on hold prior to the pandemic. So I was talking to Andrew and Aaron recently, and we were discussing how, it might be a good opportunity to sort of reintroduce athlete intelligence to the Orange County community. Craig in Middletown has still been working with them quite diligently over time, and even through the pandemic, updating and changing some of the sensors, a little more user-friendly versions that you're going to hear about today. And actually, some national insurance companies have gotten involved in this concept of bringing more intelligent, data-driven monitoring to the way that we manage high school athletics and contact athletes. So much so that Munich Re, one of the largest national insurers for schools, is actually sponsoring, to a certain extent, some of the equipment and some of the plans that I can still call you guys I1 Biometrics all the time. The athlete intelligence is utilizing. So it's a great way to sort of get involved at this point in this sort of higher level thinking about how we investigate athletic injury, how we train, how we coach kids. I can say for my own purposes, been a very valuable tool, for helping understand how to, what's happening to athletes as they play. Why are certain kids coming off with more injuries than others, perhaps? Maybe some of it's in coaching in terms of their behaviors, and being able to see in real time what they're doing right or what they're doing wrong is a big. Sorry, they're doing construction on my house. If you hear that hammering in the background, that's them putting the new frame on my front door. But anyway,
Yeah.
I'm going to turn it over to Andrew and Aaron in a second here, I just like them to be able to give you guys a little orientation to what's available these days, and it's impressive, it's amazing, it's really helpful, especially when you have kids that have been injured in the past. We don't have a great way on how to coach them for the future, especially kids that have had a couple of concussions and they're still playing. We're trying to do relative risk reduction, and we don't necessarily know if it's working or not. This is a really nice way and a nice tool that comes into play clinically when you're making decisions about how to manage your football program, or really at this time, really any contact athlete, not just football any longer. So I'm going to mute my microphone because they're literally breaking my house, and I'm going to turn it over to Andrew and Aaron to get us started here. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Dr. Blasco, thanks so much for that introduction. You mentioned a lot of really neat things that Athlete Intelligence and even myself has been able to be involved in, from the research side of things, from working with major insurance companies to help subsidize costs into high school programs that allow under-resourced and in some cases underprivileged schools be able to access this technology and this information. And I think getting involved in Athlete Intelligence in 2016, one of our big goals was to be able to develop a system that could be adopted by any level of play, and really try to operate off of three main pillars. Pillar number one is you need to make a system that's easy to use, and we're going to talk about the operations aspect of things throughout this presentation. Pillar number two is make it affordable. And then pillar number three, which in my mind is really the most important aspect of any system, any data analytics, is you make sure you answer the question of, well, what the heck do I do with the data? And I think that's an area that we really specialize on here at Athlete Intelligence, and has really been the foundation of how we fill this gap between data collection and actionable analytics. So I want to go ahead and jump into some of this. I'll do some quick introductions. If you're just joining us, we do have the chat open. We have the question box open. So feel free to jot any questions in there. Aaron's going to be monitoring that and will do his best to interrupt me as questions come up during those relevant information or times. Real quick, I'll just introduce myself, Andrew Golden, Director of Business Operations for Athlete Intelligence. Basically what that means is I get to really just be involved in all aspects of the organization, working with our research community, working through product development, working on the sidelines, and really trying to grasp what athletic trainers go through, what coaches go through, and really how we ultimately build the system that's going to provide value and going to be a resource, because that's really, really important. I'm going to introduce Coach Aaron Hill, who's also on here. Aaron has just such a unique background as a football coach, as a consultant for USA Football, works with a lot of programs on the East Coast, all the way down to south of Florida. Interesting fun fact about Aaron and I is we actually had a meeting with the Orange County Youth Football League. What was it, maybe 3 weeks ago? And we told them we were having this. They're really excited to see how they're working on implementing this technology at the youth side. We're obviously talking to everyone here to help educate you all about this technology on the high school side. And I think it creates a really unique story and a really unique environment in terms of how Orange County and the surrounding areas are putting themselves on the map as innovative leaders in tackle football and head health safety. So really exciting stuff. And then we also have Craig here, who is the head athletic trainer at Middletown High School, and has been using the athlete intelligence system from, I think, as early as 2015 up until today. So Craig's gone through a lot of the system evolutions, product evolutions, and we'll talk about a lot of that stuff today. So I just got a note that says Craig needs to be let into the meeting. So let me see if I can. I think he is in.
He is on the screen here.
Okay. Yep, I see here. Okay.
He's logged in.
Yep.
He's not able to see or hear us was the next message there.
Oh, is that right? Okay. Let's see if I can figure that out. Well, you might ask him to log out and log back in and try having him access. Yeah, have him access the link from the
Zoom, maybe the Zoom, like he said he clicked on the last link, which I think might have been a Microsoft Teams link.
Yeah, it shouldn't be.
Okay, Craig, why don't you log out and go click on the top link, which is a Zoom link, I believe. We're all in the Zoom. I mean, it says your name right here on the screen, but
yeah,
I think you need the Zoom link. All right, I'm going to mute again so I can talk to Craig.
Perfect. Awesome. So quick agenda and objective. So number one is really just defining head impact sensor technology. Being involved in this since 2016, one of the things that I've learned is close to 90 to 95% of the people that I speak with, coaches, athletic trainers, athletic directors, still haven't really been properly introduced to what head impact monitoring is or what sensor technology is. And if they have, there's still not a lot of strong understanding around, well, what do I do with the data? So we're going to talk a little bit about what it is, why it's important. We'll introduce athlete intelligence. We'll talk a little bit about this industry push towards sensor technology. Just recently, the National Athletic Trainers Association has updated their position statement that one of the big additions to that was encouraging programs to explore and implement head impact sensor technology and as a way to identify and correct head first contact. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll introduce you to the athlete intelligence ecosystem and some of the different sensor options that we offer. And then obviously the most important aspect, winning with data. What do I do with it? How's it going to help me become a more resourceful athletic trainer, a more informed athletic trainer? How's it going to help me bridge this possible gap between me and my coaching staff and how my athletes are performing? We'll talk to Craig a little bit as long as he can figure out his Zoom information and get on here, learn a little bit about how he's been using the system over the years and what's been really valuable to him. We'll hear from Aaron a little bit on the coaching community side of things and, how his involvement within USA Football and how that is also bridging over to the data analytics side of things and where head impact monitoring fits into how coaches are teaching athletes to perform and keep them safe. And then we'll talk a little bit about implementing your head impact monitoring system. A lot of what we hope to do today is become this educational platform and really help you gain a better understanding of what the system is. And for anyone on this call that is interested in the technology and interested if you qualify for the insurance subsidy program and interested in how you can implement the system into your football program, we want to be able to talk about that. One of the really cool things that we're doing as part of this webinar, and when we talk about a little bit how we handle pricing, is it's really based on number of athletes, product of choice, and the length of the contract. And so what we want to do is we want to try to come all together as separate schools, but bulk our subscriptions together so we can all help everyone save on the per athlete per year costs and really help drive that down just to make things more affordable for everyone. So we really want to try to help you all implement a system if this is something that you see fit within your program. And then leave some time for open questions. So as I did mention, Aaron's going to be monitoring the question in the chat bar. If you have questions throughout this presentation, we will talk through those. Dr. Belasco, Craig, Aaron, if at any time you want to jump off mute and pop in and ask a question, definitely feel free to do that. I love the conversational style of these discussions and these webinars. Otherwise, I feel like I'm a professor that's just going to be up here talking. So, oh, there's Craig. All right. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this real quick. You know, our goal today is to really talk about sensor technology and how it has been designed to help enhance protocol and establish head safety fundamentals. We are very firm believers, and I think research is also a very strong supporter of this. When you look at the nature of concussions and its cognitive injury side of things, sensor technology was never designed to prevent, identify, or diagnose concussions, but it has been designed to allow us to gain access to objective information. It has allowed us to better understand the exposure our athletes are experiencing during games and during practices. And so it's been able to uncover pieces of information that we've never had access to previously. And so we're going to talk a lot about what type of data that is, why that data is important, and how it's going to help us become more resourceful. This technology was not designed to replace decision making or change the way that we as athletic trainers do our jobs. But rather enhance that, rather take our concussion protocol to the next level, take head safety to the next level, again, through this information that we've just never had access to previously. So what is head impact monitoring? Breaking it down to the most simple terms, it's really just a way to use sensor technology that allows you to collect real-time monitoring of every impact from games and practice sessions. Its value is provided through the Athlete Intelligence's proprietary reporting system that really curates and provides a timestamp analysis of key trends focused around things like where impacts are taking place, who's taking these high impact workloads, and who's taking the hardest hits. The expected outcome that we want you to have and see our current customers having is improved player technique, reduced head contact, and the ability to drive fast decisions when these larger impacts occur. This is data analytics, and at the end of the day, we can't manage what we don't measure. And so this becomes a valuable resource for us to better understand what our athletes are experiencing during games and practices, our ability to look at different trends, different patterns, but most importantly, look at these outliers. So players that are performing outside the norm of what impact counts might look like, what crown of head impacts might look like. Be able to take that information and provide it in a very digestible way that allows us to develop these coachable moments or develop these opportunities to where we can drive change within our athletes and help them perform better and safer. I always like to share this quote from the Concussion Legacy Foundation. If anyone is familiar with that foundation, you know, they are pretty against youth tackle football. In some cases, they're also against tackle football. But one of the things that the Concussion Legacy Foundation talks a lot about is if we know how many hits our children take, we'll be able to reduce the number. If we reduce the number of hits, we'll reduce concussions. And if we reduce concussions, we'll protect our athletes. And so think of sensor technology as a way to really monitor, manage, and adapt to what's happening to our athletes during these games and during these practice sessions. Just a little bit about athlete intelligence. We have been commercialized since 2015. In fact, I think one of the first programs we did commercialize with was Craig at Middletown. So, he's really been able to see the evolution of both the technology, the sensors, the wearables, but most importantly, the system operations and how our data analytics has really evolved. Over the years, we've worked with over 180 different teams at the youth, high school, and college level. Our sensors have been on far more than 6,000 athletes. But I think some of the really unique aspects of athlete intelligence is how we've been able to develop different product and package options that allows us to help programs find the best products for their particular program, whether it's based on athletes, whether it's based on budgetary constraints, or whether it's based on resources available and how the system itself actually operates. Two other really important things that you heard Dr. Belasco talk about is how we are supported by a major insurance company, Munich Reinsurance. In fact, we have lists of which school districts instantly qualify for that subsidy, New York State being one of the larger states where they work with such a large number of school districts. If you fall within one of those school districts, you instantly qualify for discounts towards your athlete intelligence system. So we'll talk about how to find out if you are one of those high schools, and we'll talk about how you can access those discounts without really needing to do anything. And then lastly, what I feel really sets us apart in this sensor or wearable technology space is our actionable analytics. Being able to provide information that helps you uncover patterns, that helps you uncover opportunities. There is a keen difference between having access to data versus having access to actionable data. And so we'll talk a lot about actionable analysis, actionable data, and how that is used to improve the safety and performance of our athletes. Before we really go into the details of why athlete intelligence, I want to first jump into the what, right? And we are surrounded in this call today with athletic trainers who are far more intelligent on concussions and head-related injuries. But when we look at some of these patterns, when we look at what research has really and how it's evolved over the years, what we're finding is that sub-concussive impacts are harmful. Yes, we know that the big hits have a higher chance of causing concussions, but it's these sub-concussive impacts that we need to be more aware of. Poor technique is now becoming obvious. Aaron will talk a little bit about the technique, and I'm sure every head coach and assistant coach in your program is teaching some sort of technique that's either shoulder led or rugby style to really remove that head from contact, because there is this major shift to reduce overall head contact, right? We heard from the Concussion Legacy Foundation that really talked about we have to limit or remove head from any type of contact. But how we do it is through sensor technology that is going to transmit and timestamp data. We do have the ability to send real-time alerts when those bigger impacts occur. So we're able to cover this wide range of knowing when larger impacts occur, but also being able to track every head impact during this game or practice session. But most importantly is how we provide these automated reports, how we curate and collect all this data and push it to you in a very simplistic way, either through an emailed report right to your inbox or through a web-based dashboard, which we will cover a little bit later in this presentation. But the why around this is because I think all of us want to enhance player head safety. We want to be able to identify fundamental technique improvements. If we know which positions or which athletes are driving head impact workloads, head impact counts, we know there is a technique adjustment opportunity. That information is going to allow us to see that. That information is allow us to make change and then track those changes over time. And once again, when we talk about data analytics, you can't manage what you don't measure. And so why athlete intelligence? It's because we've developed a system that was designed for the coaching and athletic training staff to enhance current contact drills and our head safety protocols, and to be able to take complex data and to be able to see it in a very simplistic way of being able to see these visual confirmations of impact workload, so we can improve technique, reduce head impacts, and have overall improvement of head health safety. I also like to share this quote from one of the high school programs we work with, Pullman High School, where, when we talked to their athletic trainer in terms of what became really valuable, she always talked about being able to see the hits that would normally go unseen and use the data to help change the way that our athletes engage in contact. If that quote and testimonial right there doesn't summarize what it is that we do and what it is that we provide, I just don't think it can get really more clear than that. We want to be able to take every single one of these impacts that are occurring during games and practices, curate it and provide it in this way to where it tells us something. It helps us get access to context of what's happening on the field during games, during practice drills, and be able to help us ask the questions and find answers to the questions that we've just never been able to ask ourselves before. So what I'm showing you right now is the athlete intelligence system. We've got mobile applications, we've got web-based dashboards, we've got automated reports that can get sent directly to your email. We've got the ability to send alerts and notifications directly to your Apple Watch or Android Watch. So we've created this system that is easily adopted and easily implemented into any program level and essentially resources available, using tools and technology that we already access every single day. So while we've developed the system to be very user-friendly, it all ties back into how we help create visibility into the impacts that are occurring, be able to track those impacts during games and practice sessions, provide actionable analytics. And then as we've seen this influx in this new need for getting access to real-time information, we have these capabilities of being able to transmit real-time alerts. I want to talk a little bit about the impact tracking options. At the end of the day, these sensors are just data collection devices, and we've developed a few different types of sensors because each one of them has a unique set of features and functions and how they work and what their capabilities are. But the core foundation of every single one of our sensors is their ability to track impact location. So where did the impact take place on the athlete's head? Be able to track impact count. So looking at it from a workload perspective, and impact severity. So how hard of an impact, and we display that in G-force. The sensor that you're looking at on the screen right now is our Q-Sport sensor. We consider this to be our entry-level product because this uses standard Bluetooth technology. And so as a Bluetooth-enabled sensor, we treat this as a post-game or post-practice style of sensor, where it is going to collect and store data during a game in practice. And then following any session, you download that data from your mobile phone. And once that data has been downloaded, reports are curated, produced, and emailed out. This sensor was designed to be used in both helmeted and non-helmeted sports. So if you've got women's lacrosse, we've worked with a few women's soccer teams. It creates this opportunity to use it in one sport in the fall, like football, and then move it to another sport in the spring, like boys lacrosse, women's lacrosse. And being a Bluetooth enabled product and an entry level product, it's also allowed us to keep costs extremely low on this sensor here. The Vector Mouthguard is the product you heard Dr. Belasco talking about with the CDC study. The Vector Mouthguard was the first product that we had ever commercialized back in 2015. We consider it to be our premium product for really two main reasons. Number one, we're basically taking cell phone-like technologies, putting it in a mouth guard and asking kids to chew on it. So that's very complex, that's very expensive, and allows us to call it premium for that reason. The other reason we consider it to be our more premium product is because, you know, being a mouth guard and being affixed to your skull, it allows us to get far more advanced analytics around head kinematics, head movement, and that's very attractive to the research community. In fact, aside from the CDC, we've worked with Indiana University. We just went under contract with Ohio State University's research team, Marshall University. This sensor of choice has been popular in that research community because they want to look at things like the impact waveform. They want to look at rotational acceleration patterns. They want to look at far more advanced data and detail that I think is really, really important. But when we look at what's important to a team and how a team is going to use this information to improve athlete safety and performance, it really comes down to was there an impact, where did it take place, and about how hard was it. So you know, at the time when this was the first product that we had available, or even when we had the Q Sports sensor, there was still a lot of attraction from the high school and college level, though, because as you can see in the bottom of the screen, it's where we start to introduce this idea around live data streaming and alert notifications. The mouthguard uses a sideline receiver that allows us to transmit data instantly. Bluetooth, where you have capabilities in how far and how fast you can transmit data using a sideline receiver, you don't have those challenges. And in fact, with the mouthguard, we can transmit data instantly up to 300 yards. Where this became very valuable to the athletic training community is when they're still in the training room taping ankles, or when they're on the sidelines taping an athlete or talking to an athlete. It created this ability to get additional eyes and ears on the field for if an impact that was large enough to occur could transmit that real-time alert to your phone, to your Apple Watch, to let you know, hey, number 76 just took a 60G impact. So we introduced this way to instantly transmit every impact, but be able to alert you when those larger impacts occurred instantaneously. The third product that we just recently commercialized is our Q Plus. And, you know, when we had our mouth guard, we found that, you know, 30% of athletes at many programs didn't wear a mouth guard, or wanted to wear some special fancy style of mouth guard that maybe had a cool design on it, which then led us to create the helmet affixed sensor. As I talked about with the Q Sports sensor, that being Bluetooth, we found people really wanting a helmet affixed sensor that was also real time, and that's when we launched the Q Plus. So we basically took what became very valuable in the mouth guard, and that was you know, an easy system to use that provided live and real-time data transmission in the form factor of our Q Sports sensor, which can go up inside a helmet, be transferable between athletes, and allow schools to basically amortize the sensor across sports and across players. two additional features that we're currently looking at exposing over the next handful of months and maybe years is, number one, a helmet temperature module. So all these sensors already have an ambient temperature module implanted in the sensor that allows us to track the temperature inside of an athlete's helmet. Just like our real-time alerts, we wanted to be able to notify an athletic trainer when an athlete has a higher temperature. We know 80% of your body temperature tries to escape through your head. If you're wearing a helmet, it can't escape, and that's what oftentimes causes heat fatigue. And we want to try to combat that as well. And then the other aspect that we are looking at is a GPS performance tracking addition. So head impact monitoring is our core, but as we all know, performance is sexy. And if we can look at some of these things like the acute to chronic workload ratios, that might tell us a lot about patterns in performance, patterns in technique, and really how we can better monitor our athletes and their exposure. How are questions doing, Aaron? How the system works. Sorry, go ahead. Questions
A
good?
couple easy ones, just asking, yep, who they should be connecting with following the webinar. So
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So how it works is really simple. These sensors have batteries, they need to be charged. We have some devices that will last a couple weeks. We've got some sensors that will last a handful of days. And we have some that we recommend charging prior to each contact practice or games. But the sensors themselves, before a game or practice, if you're using the helmet affixed ones, go up inside the helmet. Obviously, if you're wearing a mouth guard, you wear it like any other mouth guard. During sessions, data is going to transmit. You can see that data live if you're using them in live mode, or for the Q Sport sensor, when that data is stored and downloaded later, is instantly accessible. But once again, where this system becomes valuable is when you can actually see that data and review that data. And as I mentioned, we have two different ways that we provide this information to you, either through an automated emailed report or through our web-based dashboard that can be accessed from anywhere on any device. But what I want to jump into now, we've talked about head impact monitoring, we've talked about data analytics. And I want to try to help bring all that together and share some different ways that teams have used this data, to share some different ways that we've been able to identify what we call these coachable moments. And I think what every program wants to do is, how do we maximize intensity by minimizing injury? And so really quickly, I want to share the story from Mount Si High School, which is a program we started working with in 2018, because they were really one of the first ones to help us drive this new reporting aspect, and share a lot of details. Once I talk through this, I know Craig might want to share some ways that he's used the system as well. But what you're looking at on my screen, and I'm sorry if it's small to see, but this is the second report that this high school program received in after their second week of practice. If you can't see it on here, on this first page of the automated reports, very, very briefly, do we highlight team overview, and then we highlight athlete insights, which are really the top 5 opportunities or the top 5 contributors. So when we look at controllable data points, if we know which athletes are taking crown of head impacts and using improper technique, we can correct that. If we know which athletes are taking the most amount of head impacts, whether it's position-based or whether it's players, we can correct that. And so in a lot of these reports, we're highlighting things that are correctable, that are changeable, that that can be improved upon. And so when this high school program athletic trainer received their first report, they saw that the top 5 athletes with the most amount of crown of head impacts were their freshman linemen, right? So those kids just coming into this program, still trying to establish that technique fundamental. And when that athletic trainer got the report, she passed it along to the coaches. When the coach saw the report, he had that aha moment. So I know exactly what we're doing this week. We're focusing on drills. We're focusing on technique. We're focusing on these athletes and how they get up off the lines with their heads up and hands up. And when they focused on that for the entire week of practice and got this second report, that's when they saw that 29% reduction of crown of head impacts, right? So that really, as a system and as a platform and as a resource, really all we did was curate and provide this information in a way that these teams were able to identify the opportunity. And it was in the ability to the coaches and the athletic training staff to work together on how we create these behavior modifications in our athletes to help them perform better and ultimately perform safer. This high school went on to win second in state, and you had 0 reported concussions. But what you'll find in a lot of these reports and in the analytics that I'll show you is how we use data to identify trends and patterns, and most importantly, improvements over time. If I'm the quarterback and Aaron's running across the middle and I throw him the ball and he gets lit up, that big impact in often cases isn't really preventable. Maybe I shouldn't have thrown him the ball, but sometimes when we look at concussions, where we look at these big impacts, they're almost like anomalies, right? In the sense of like, hey, you just got blindsided, he got hit and hit his head on the ground. It's not very controllable of a data point, but ultimately it's very important information for us to have when we look at, higher G-force impacts, where we look at things like second impact syndrome. But when we look at crown of head impacts and when we look at total impacts, those are controllable. And when we see these outliers, it allows us to work closer with these athletes to improve their technique, to make sure they're removing their head from contact, to be able to identify what drills we might be running, which might be driving the higher impact counts. And so, it was really rewarding to hear this high school talk about, when we first saw the reports, it was easy to identify which athletes weren't keeping their heads up, so the coaches knew who they had to work closer with. And once again, I think that really helps fill that gap of where athlete intelligence fits into your program. We're not trying to change the way tell you to change the way you run practice. We're not trying to tell you to change the way you are an athletic training practitioner. But we do want to be able to uncover this information that you might not be able to see from the sidelines, from the film, and be able to curate that information in a form that does become accessible and, most importantly, digestible. And so it's just been really exciting to see how teams have leveraged this data in a lot of different ways. Craig, I don't know if you maybe wanted to jump in for a quick second. You've been obviously someone who's used the system for a number of years, number of different products. Has there been any way that you felt this system has really helped you become more resourceful and see things that you maybe hadn't been able to previously see?
Absolutely, Andrew. I mean, you summed up a lot of the evolution on how athletic trainers are and can be using this information and the technology. It's pretty much exactly how my program evolved, and even me personally evolved in getting the information out of it that's really what's most valuable. So I mean, starting out, I wanted the mouth guard, I wanted the technology, I wanted to be part of the idea that there wasn't data even on the threshold of what's going to bring on the symptoms of a concussion. And so initially this idea of just getting data, that single hard hit data, my focus was just like you stated, the linear velocity force, G forces, the rotational acceleration G force, and I'm trying to, utilize that information as part of my evaluation on the injury or the athlete particular hit. But quite quickly, that had limits. Okay, so it gave me an idea on threshold and G forces, but what did that really mean? What was most important is knowing the athlete took a hard hit, and potentially, obviously, where was that hit taken, and that was just extra information. So the evolution, even with me, it was, all right, what's more important or as important, and it was those hit counts. And so, the idea of there's valuable information on a game day specific hit situation, but then there's valuable information on overall for the program and how all my athletes are dealing with a full season, from the preseason where you're doing extra practices, long days, to the end of the season, potentially postseason. Some of your best players, how many hits have they taken over the season thus far? And then all the in between. So in order for me to have my program, athletic department, and my coaches all buy into this, and my athletes, it needed to be more than just me. I needed to prove that I'm offering them educational information. So not information that's also going to make me want to have a discussion with an athlete about, hey, look, your skill, your performance on how you're tackling it needs to change, and or you need to be aware of where you're taking your hits. You're a running back. Yes, you're running through people, but look at the crown impacts. So those are the conversations that I would have with the athlete, but then also I'd have with the coaches now, right? And I'd be able to show them and say, look, here's what can be an issue. We have, yes, our top athlete looks like they're easily running through people, but look at where all the hits are occurring. Like, this athlete still is not seeing the chest of the linebacker in front of them, right? They're putting their head down, obviously, maybe too much, or when they're diving for that extra yard, look at the extra impact they're taking. So, overall, I've seen my program accept that there are new tools to teaching the game of football. And, the tools that are helping me have this data are also helping the coaches. We've brought in people to help change our style of tackling, and really focus on head out of the way. We brought in coaches, the coach from Dartmouth, where, he was one of the first in the NCAA to say, hey, he has kids that went through 4 years of college high level football, and they've never tackled each other in 4 years. So you've never hit your own teammate in 4 years of college football. And those are the things that I think that are putting Middletown where we are, and that is just like the athletic trainer you were referring to in your last example there. I don't have, in the last couple of years, granted COVID changed the timing and the calendar of our football, but my concussion data, my concussion injuries are drastically down in relationship to my past seasons prior to having this technology. And then if I just then go from my varsity to JV, where JV doesn't have this use, granted, there are other factors that are going to come into play, like you discussed, younger athletes just having poor form. But I really, it's changed how I've been able to deal with football and the concussion and the head injuries overall. It's a drastic difference.
No, that's great. Aaron, coming from the coaching side of things, tell us a little bit about what you're seeing from USA football, changes at the high school and even youth level, and where you see this type of technology fit in.
Yeah, I think Craig just nailed it. The last 2 minutes was really gold. And just speaking as a coach, I think it's relatively simple on our end. This platform allows us to validate our teachings on the football field. You mentioned it earlier, Andrew. We talk a lot about new tackling and blocking techniques, kind of the evolution of the tackle, right? From the heads up tackle to the hawk style tackle, the rugby style tackling to now the shoulder tackle system through USA football. We make these changes and tweaks to how we coach and our technique, but we've never been able to put tangible data on the process, right? And this really gives us an opportunity to do that. So in the same vein, we've canceled old school drills, evolved into a new way of practice planning and limiting contact. But again, there's never been a true management or monitoring of the process. So this allows us as coaches to plan practices better, manage our athlete workloads better. We can monitor impacts of practices and in games. So, you had a great example with the Mount Si, high school football program out west. We've got a youth football organization that set a goal here on the East Coast of never having the same athlete show up in their top 5 crowd have had impacts in a given week. And they were able to accomplish that goal just by tracking and reviewing the reports. And you're talking about an old school organization, an old school coach mindset who kind of crossed that line and came on board and are really using the platform to their advantage. So these are just great examples of how coaches, youth football organizations, high school football organizations are just using technology to be smarter and safer on the field. And on the USA football side of things, just they've embraced the idea, they've embraced the technology, they love the platform. The implementation process is simple and it's meaningful. So the conversations have gone really well. We just got to find a way to endorse this and adopt this across the country because we're doing some great stuff on the football field.
Yeah, I think it allows us to keep that same style of barbaric nature of tackle football, which I think we all enjoy. I don't think, we're at a point yet where we're ready for high school football to turn into flag football. But there's been some important changes in terms of how many contact practices we can have and how we engage in contact. And, I think what we're all kind of summarizing in a sense is that the next missing piece is how we monitor and manage that, right? There's been some studies that recently came out around, outcomes of, hey, do we limit contact practices, right? Well, what are the concerns about limiting contact practices? Then are you, since you have shorter amount of time to handle contact practices, are you going to fit in more contact in a shorter amount of time and end up putting kids more at risk, right? So data, and I think what we're finding through systems like this, it just becomes so valuable, so important, not just to see what has happened, but how things continue to trend. And Craig, like you said, how how this has been correlated to your concussions and protocols and been able to see things decrease. There would just be no other way to really know that unless you had this data, unless you had this information. So really appreciate
Andrew,
it. Yeah.
Real quick, just jumping in to expand on what you just said. I did have a conversation recently with a youth football administrator out of Boston who talked about the limits on practicing technique in practice, right? Like they're not supposed to be going over 15 or 20 minutes of contact in practice. But he talked about expanding those opportunities for his coaches to teach that technique as long as they're tracking and monitoring and managing that data, right? So they can see that they're doing it in a smart manner. He don't mind expanding those opportunities, but they have to be doing it the right way, right? It's got to be done in the best interest of the athletes and the parents and obviously the organization overall.
Yep. No, absolutely.
Yeah, I would add to the data, having a platform and having more data and have it sort of a team focused and broken down in all the ways that you're breaking it down. My conversations in where they were initially focused on the athlete that took a hard hit or what that was injured in a game. Now I'm reviewing. I'm sitting in my office and I'm reviewing throughout the week. I'm reviewing the game information maybe over and over again. My conversations are now with multiple athletes throughout the week, hey, how do you feel? Because I'm looking back, you took some good hits or you took a lot of hits or All your hits were on one side of your helmet. I'm having conversations with multiple athletes because I have all this extra data to review, and it's allowing me, like we stated in the beginning, it's having the eyes on players that you don't have eyes on all the time, and having the data. I can't, I don't until I sometimes I look back and go, wow, how would I have been able to pick up on some of these things with certain athletes without the data? The bottom line is I wouldn't have. Does that mean this athlete falls through the cracks, ends up having an injury in a game that could have been avoided because it may have been the idea that they'd taken too many hits just during the week, maybe. So it is valuable, and it's definitely changed how I see my football seasons.
Yeah. Dr. Belasco, you want to jump in there real quick?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, so in that combination between, the athletic training department and then the treating clinicians, this kind of data really allows us to take the long-term longitudinal management of an athlete medically to the next level. Because invariably kids are going to have concussions, they're going to have multiple ones, and every week I have a conversation with one or two athletes about with their parents about what's the long-term implications of these things, when is too many hits, and are there ways that we can improve play and make them safer. And a lot of the time it really comes down to a retrospective review of their injuries as much as we can. And that's a big part of it. And then trying to devise a risk reduction strategy, which I mentioned earlier, in how can you allow them to try to participate to a certain extent while relatively improving their safety. And a huge piece that, if I could say, I don't know how many kids, I try very hard not to just, paternalistically eliminate kids from play. I think it's a very, very bad decision medically. I think it has a lot of implications for them psychosocially. You can't just be like, all right, you're done. No more football. I know it's been your life for 10 years, but forget it. So we do that very rarely. And I do it personally very rarely. And in sports medicine, we try to do it rarely. If I had a tool where I could say, okay, we can watch you through the season, and if you hit certain thresholds of force or you take enough hits, we'll be done for the season, or maybe you sit out for a couple of weeks, or we create some kind of a much more advanced strategy. Then, in the old days, we used to say, okay, you're done. Then we started saying, okay, coach, can we move this athlete to a position that we know is less risky on their team, maybe? Or maybe they could play in less parts of the game or less total minutes of the game. But that's the only way we really had a way to interact. And so with this, the evolution of this as a biometric tracking tool, just like, we don't manage diabetics remotely just with talking about their diet. We know what their sugar is, and if they're bad diabetics, we have constant monitoring on them. People with congestive heart failure, we have constant monitoring on their weights, and sometimes other salt metrics, sometimes other things. So there's moving all of these medical conditions to some kind of a data driven and monitoring is where everything in medicine is going, and as well it should be in sports medicine. So if I had this kind of tool available to me on every athlete that I took care of, that I was worried about their long-term outcomes, it would be completely transformative. So it's not just about what's happening in the game or what's happening for training, but it's also about the lifelong health and career of that athlete, and shepherding them through each phase when they go to college and play, through each phase of their career. So that's sort of I would say sort of the longitudinal medical point to that. And with that, I am going to have to sign off.
Okay.
If there's any specific questions for me, I'm happy to take them, and then I'm gonna run.
Yeah. Absolutely. Perfect. All right. I'm going to actually shift to our.
We do have a quick question here. If you want to touch on it, Andrew, while we have Dr. Blasco for a minute.
Okay.
Question came through here. How many sub-concussive hits would be something that we would want to flag? Would we retest them on impact for doctor review? So it's kind of a combination of questions.
Well, and Dr. Belasco, you can jump in on this one a little bit, but I think that's part of that gray area in trying to understand concussions where we still are today. We don't know how many hits are too many. But what we can look at and what the system allows us to look at is, well, on average, how many head impacts are our athletes taking, and who within that baseline is performing outside of the norm. Who's taking far more impacts than the average number that a particular position group is taking, or that the team as a whole is taking. In baseball, we have pitch counts where pitchers are getting pulled based on the number of throws. I don't think, and I don't know that we're quite there yet with hit counts, because of the very similar the individualized, unique nature of concussions and cognitive changes. But but we're getting there. We're getting close, and I think there's a lot of research that's out there to help support it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Andrew that it's a real sort of microcosmic answer. So really the way that you use that data to make meaningful change in your program is by looking at the relative rate of sort of subconcussive hits, or higher than average hit intensities. So I would recommend, since as Andrew alluded to, nationally, internationally, we don't really have answers about that yet, because this technology is in its nascent distributional phase. In Europe, a couple of other places, we're definitely seeing this coming out, but this is definitely the cutting edge of things in terms of how we're managing stuff. So we're really extracting information from different studies, like the CDC study is a good place, and a few others about those. But how I would say, so there's not like a number, like a pitch count. But what I would say is something that's really important is looking microcosmically inside your own program and saying, okay, we are going to commit to a little more intensive monitoring and observation of our athletes who are, the top 20% of our hit counts, maybe the top 10% of our hit counts. And, they're going to maybe be under a little bit more scrutiny. Maybe we're going to do balance testing with them a little bit more often. Maybe we will do mid-season impact testing if you have that available to you, looking for meaningful change from baseline. There's a great study, and I say great because my co-fellow did it when I was a resident, so it's his study, so it's a good study, because I helped. No, but there's actually quite a few studies showing that looking at soccer athletes preseason, midseason, postseason, and heading, which is probably the sport where this idea of like a subconcussive hit really kind of started to come forward, was in soccer with heading and heading counts. And the idea that you can actually track athletes, and there's a statistically significant relationship between how many headers they do in practice and in games, and changes on their impact testing from pre to mid to postseason, is actually really well established. So we know that even kids who don't have a concussion but have subconcussive hits, they can make neurocognitive differences through the season. So yeah, absolutely, there's a precedent for flagging certain groups of athletes, either by perhaps position or your starters, or just across the board, who's taking the most hits, who's the top 10% of our hits, and monitoring them more intensely with eye tracking, King Divic or something like that, with a balance error scoring system or some other type of balance test that you want to do, and or even maybe a mid-season impact test to look for statistically significant changes, especially in the areas of reaction time and visual motor processing speed, may yield very high dividends in terms of observing and maybe even preventing concussion in some of those kids, if you wanted to rotate them out of a position, or just make sure the coaches know, look, Johnny's like way far out ahead of everybody else, and I did his balance again. We did some eye tracking stuff, and he gets a little nauseous with eye tracking. Balance is a little off from his baseline. Or we redid his impact, and it looks like his numbers are changing a little bit, or he's actually reporting. He's not saying anything, but when he sits down in front of the computer, his total symptom score is being reported as statistically significant, even though he doesn't say anything in practice. Let's take a closer look, maybe get the doc involved, or maybe just, talk to him about backing off or something else. So I think that absolutely it starts to open the whole window up of many different kinds of monitoring and other protocols that you could institute, depending on where you want to go with that data. Yeah, absolutely.
No, thanks for that. One of the things that I didn't mention, and Dr. Blasco, if you have to head out, then thanks again for being part of this and helping set this up. But
yeah, I'm going to sign off. Thank you, everyone. And if there's further questions, certainly you can forward them to me afterwards, and I'm happy to write up an answer for the attendees or what have you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Dr. Blasco. But one of the things that we didn't really talk about, you've heard me mention things like real-time alerts on impacts and setting thresholds. But what the system also offers is the ability to set custom thresholds at point of when you want to get alerted by the athlete themselves. So imagine that you have an athlete coming off of a concussion return to play protocol, and you set your team threshold at 45 Gs, meaning anytime an impact at or above 45 Gs occurs, you get a notification. You can set that individual athlete's threshold at 30 Gs. So if Johnny takes an impact at 30 Gs, you get alerted. You can be aware of his exposure instantly when certain hit counts are met. So there's a lot of customization around that at the athlete level, at the team level, but most importantly, and as I dive into this platform, what you're going to find is we've really developed the system to be customizable towards your program. And even towards your time allocation, where we have some of our programs, they just use their automated reports, they get it to their email, and that's really the extent of using the system. But what I want to show you next is some of these other tools that are accessible to help you identify these certain patterns and opportunities within your program. So really quickly, because of my technical skills, Aaron, is my screen being shared right now?
Yes, you're good, Andrew.
Okay, perfect. So what I'm showing everyone right now is our web-based platform. Once again, this can be accessed from anywhere. And there's a few just main features I always like to share. And number one is we have this team drop down where you can have all your different teams, whether it's levels of football, whether it's, adding your lacrosse team, your women's soccer team. So there's a lot of flexibility within that, and a lot of flexibility just within the amount of users you can have and who has access to what. Team settings, very straightforward, where we will set or you can set your thresholds for both G-force, impact quantities, and crown of head impact quantities. So in the analytics aspect of things, these numbers will be identified when exceeded, but when used with the Vector Mouthguard or our Q+, which offers those real-time capabilities, this threshold is also what triggers an alert notification. And as you can see, you can set team staff and whether or not others can receive or want to receive alert notifications. So just a lot of flexibility there. We use sessions to display data. So you have the ability to set your game and practice schedules, season start dates, season end dates, and then during those timeframes, is actually when the impacts will be displayed. So we hide any impacts that happen outside of practice, outside of a game, and only display things that happen in a session. Prior to your season starting, we will upload your rosters, we will add positions, we will associate the sensors with a jersey sticker. So upon shipping a system to you, everything will be set and ready for you to use. Of course, if you don't have your rosters finalized or positions finalized, all of these can be edited and updated on your end. Clicking on any athlete is where you can also go in and set an athlete's custom threshold. So again, creating that flexibility on an individualized aspect of things. I mentioned two main ways of being able to access data. So number one is through our automated reporting system, where you can schedule daily, weekly, and monthly reports and select when you want to receive those, right? So if your game ends at 7 and you want your report sent at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, that system will automatically kick out an email at that time. And then once again, you can manage who receives those reports and at what frequency, right? Let's say you and your coaches want them daily, weekly, monthly. Let's say an athletic director wants them weekly, and maybe a superintendent wants them monthly. So once again, just a lot of flexibility within how you can access this data. But most valuable and probably one of the more frequent ways that teams are accessing this data is through our web-based dashboard. And, Craig was such a big factor in how we built this and making sure that we were challenged to only focus on aspects of data visualization that could drive change, that wasn't providing death by data. And so we once again built this to be customizable to your program, being able to look at any custom date range, any subset of athletes, looking at specific players or positions, looking at game versus practice data. But ultimately what we wanted to do is we wanted to use those thresholds and first identify how many athletes breached any of the thresholds that we set, right? So here we have athletes with head impacts over the severity team threshold, and we can see we have 10 athletes that had taken an impact over our preset threshold, 35 total impacts over our preset threshold. So just being able to see that, like, okay, we had set some benchmarks for ourselves, and we've reached those. Going on to this next graph here, what we wanted to do is just show this visualization of what impact counts look like over time. When you have a system and you have a lot of data and you can look at a wider date range, it's really interesting to see how great you can manage impact workloads and how you can actually see impact counts going down throughout the season, thus validating once again that what we're teaching our athletes to do is actually being followed. It's been interesting to see impact counts in practices go down, and sometimes teams will see certain spikes within games, but it just creates this visualization throughout the season of how are we trending. Then things start to get broken down until once again, what we find to be most important, right? Who are my top 5 athletes with the most amount of crown of head impacts? Who are my top 5 athletes with the most amount of impact counts or the highest workloads? And which of my athletes have taken the hardest hits? And then all we do is continue to break that down in a very visually appealing way to look at crown of impacts by position and look at specific player trends, right? So here, if I'm looking at average impact count by position, I see that my defensive line is, a little bit above what our other positions are. I can see all of my positions. And once again, my D line is really the one that is, driving these numbers. So by seeing these patterns, by, seeing some of these trends, we can really start to look at, well, who are our top contributors to that? I can click on any athlete and it's going to show me a specific athlete's profile and what their impact trends look like. I can now 3D model every single impact during this time frame on this athlete's head to look at what their patterns on, to look at what their tendencies are. These blue impacts are impacts that have occurred below the team set threshold. The red impacts are the ones that happened above that threshold. So I can click on any one of these impacts and I can see at 10:44 a.m., Aaron took a impact to the back of his head, right? What does that tell me? He maybe got pancaked. He got hit and hit his head on the ground. And it's very frequent for our customers to see some of these impacts, look at the timestamp, go back to the film and be like, wow, I never saw this. And most often what that does is create an opportunity to then go back to the athlete and work with them on their technique, show them, hey, see, when you're coming off the line here, you want to know why you got pushed backwards, you lost leverage. And it creates a very easy conversation. We can also see that 68% of his impacts happen to the left side of his head. I'm not a football coach, but I'm sure, Aaron, as a football coach, if you saw someone taking so many impacts to one part of their head, that creates that coachable moment. You'd want to know that. You'd want to know that, hey, this is presenting an opportunity for me to reestablish what fundamental techniques look like and how to work closer on this athlete to be able to track, improve, and then most importantly, see those numbers drop once we've instilled those changes. So, you know, a lot of ways to look at player comparisons. But, you know, one of the things that we make very clear with a lot of these analytics is everything that has been developed here has come from the teams that we work with. What's going to be important to you? What are the things that, you know, you want to see? And it's just been remarkable on how we've been able to find this balance between, you know, having access to actionable information and having access to things that are really going to help drive change. So I know we've gone over a little bit. I really appreciate everyone kind of staying on. I'm going to pull up just the presentation real quick on just this first slide that has my contact information and Aaron's contact information. But without taking up too much time, is there anyone that wants to throw a question out there? Craig, is there anything that you want to add before we, you know, close this thing down, or Aaron, before we close this thing down?
Real quick, what I will say is the list you provided me. So the majority of the schools, the athletic trainers within Section 9 are on that list. So,
okay.
so that discount. All right. The other thing I will say is, yeah, initially all this stuff logistically, it took extra time away from, you know, a list of things that we're already trying to juggle as athletic trainers. Now, I mean, I'm now using the Q Plus more often than anything else right now. I mean, I love the mouth guard. Q Plus though has allowed for even more use, like you discussed, right? It can go multiple sports inside a headband, a helmet. Much easier to deal with. There's no disinfection of mouth guards. It's less expensive than the mouth guard, and it's still giving you the valuable information that's needed. So, you know, what I definitely will, you know, I'll be running into the core of my athletic trainers quite soon. We're trying to actually get our own little thing together, and I'll be able to casually kind of discuss, you know, things that they may have missed and help them reach you with more specific information or questions later on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, just another big goal of ours is to be able to have those deeper conversations. Working with athletic programs, we know the operational challenges, even the financial challenges that many experience, but we also know that head health safety is a very important topic, and in many cases a topic that many people involved within athletics or even outside of athletics, the community, the, you know, school boards do see value in and want to support and want to get behind. And so you know, a big part of what we want to see out of this outcome is, you know, who is interested in this technology, who does see value in implementing this within your program. And once again, being able to come together as a group to find a way for everyone to, you know, implement a system that's going to fit their program, whether you want to do the mouth guard, whether you want to try the Q Sport sensor, or whether you want to do the Q Plus. My goal and Aaron's goal are here to be your resource, to be a source of information, to help answer those questions, and ultimately help make sure that you're making a comfortable decision. And you know, we've been through this process with a number of programs in similar situations that have never been exposed to this information, this technology, how it works. And so I feel like we have a really good model in how we help programs feel comfortable with this, and how we help them implement this, and how we handle our deployments, and how we're there for you every step of the way to make sure that this is a resource and not a burden. And I think people really appreciate that about just us and our business. So Aaron, anything you want to add, or anyone want to type in any other questions or comments?
Not on my end, Andrew, and there's nothing in the Q&A or chat right now.
Okay, perfect. Well, I just want to once again thank everyone for joining us today, and for being a part of this, and for just taking that first step of learning more. I hope everyone is able to walk away with at least you know, something new that they maybe didn't know about just the technology or just head impact monitoring in general. So really appreciate everyone. Our contact information is there. We can also look at, I think we have some email addresses from when you signed up, so we can you know, shoot you this presentation if you want to share it with anyone else that maybe wasn't able to make it. But we would just really appreciate your time. We value you, we support you. This has been designed and developed for, you know, athletic training staff primarily, to help you become more resourceful, and hopefully that we're able to accomplish that together. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to meeting and speaking with everyone who joined today. So enjoy your rest of the day. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, everybody.